thank you so much for joining us. I almost said this afternoon. It's this afternoon here where I'm sitting. And I understand that we have folks from all different areas. So again, thank you for joining us today. So I'd like to start by
Mhm.
telling you a bit about how we got here. Dale and I are both members of a collective of women leaders in Nova Scotia, and we call ourselves Using Our Influence. We use an approach called critical appreciative inquiry to tackle tough subjects that have an impact on the lives of rural women and girls. We have hosted a number of community conversations around concerns such as sexual violence, domestic violence, substance use, gambling, and we facilitate in such a way that we recognize how difficult those topics are. And we also recognize the resilience and the strength that lies in the community.
Is about how do we hold each other up while we hold ourselves up, you know? As an adult educator who's done a lot, I can sit here and I can use really large academic words. I can. And Rhonda's heard me and told me, occasionally tells me, Dale, bring it down to not 10 syllables, because that's the academic jargon. But here, like when we talk about, and in a bit, I'll use the word trauma informed practice, but compassionate conversations, that is how we demonstrate that. And tonight, that's what we're going to do. Our purpose here is, and it's in our little sign here, compassion for others. Compassion, it also starts with ourselves. So tonight we'll talk about what does that mean for us and what do you already know? Because I suspect, as when I start most of my workshops around this, that most of us actually already know a lot of this, but perhaps we need to give ourselves permission to know that we know and to use what we already know. If you find yourself tonight or anywhere uncomfortable, think about 5 things you see, 4 things you hear, 3 things you feel, 2 things you smell, 1 thing you taste, or any version of that, the senses. I think I might have said it in a different way that it's up there. But what it is to bring yourself into your place. So you can do this today or any other time. To think of a time in your own life. I'm not going to ask you guys to necessarily share it, but just take a moment. Think of a time when you shared something difficult with someone and you felt supported by that person that you can find it in. Think of this, a real story. It's not one of those pedantic ones where you were on a mountain and you felt it. It's like, I had this actual exchange with someone. And I want you to think about that. And think about, what did that person say or do that helped you feel supported? What was it? Because this is a good place to start our discussion about what compassionate conversations are. Because sort of, may I dare say, I'm going to lean in and say this. Maybe we already know a lot about what this means. And this is where we start supporting ourselves to know. We uphold ourselves and reinforce that. So, people are starting to type. Okay, so we've got, they listened to you deeply. They held eye contact. They're being heard accurately. Acceptance and non-judgmental. More than anything else, they listened. Okay.
When we think about what it means to listen compassionately or to listen with sensitivity, and notice how Dale framed her question. Dale framed the question as, think about a time when you felt supported. Now, when I listen to Dale read some of what is in the chat and listen, a tissue and a hug, feeling of being heard and acknowledged. They said the people that are really truly your friends will still be there. Being heard accurately. Now, let's take another moment and turn this and think about, these are the things that helped you feel supported. So it probably follows that those are the same things that would help other folks feel supported. And I'm sure you've already noticed a bit of a theme happening, which is we hold knowledge. We already all hold knowledge about how to be supportive, how to be compassionate, and what it means to have a trauma sensitive approach. A trauma sensitive approach is compassionate listening. And in my work in women's transition houses and outreach services, and Dale in her work, because Dale has done some training with staff who I have worked with, we've spent a lot of time talking about those big words, those big concepts, the big ideas. And whether we say trauma sensitive approach, whether we talk about trauma informed practice, there are many ways, whether we talk about resilience, with all of these words that feel very weighty. If we talk about compassionate listening and we talk about communication, how we talk to each other, and not just how we talk, but how we sit with each other, often in a very physical way. Those bits of communication, those verbal, the body language, makes a huge, huge difference in supporting folks who clearly already trust us because they're telling us some really tough stuff. And because they've chosen to tell you something really challenging, that trust relationship, for whatever reason, is already there. So if we intentionally reflect on what we have said to someone or what someone has said to us in the past that has been helpful, then like anything else, and I believe Dale already said this earlier, we practice, we get better, we get more comfortable. And if we reflect on these things on a regular basis, then it becomes intentional. It feels more second nature, but it becomes more comfortable and it becomes more intentional. One of the things that we will encourage, and if we were presenting here in Nova Scotia, we would give you a list of resources and organizations that offer services. We do encourage you to know the resources and services in your area, because that's a piece of learning that I think is helpful as we move forward to reflect on how to have passionate conversations. If we know the resources and we have a bit of a relationship with some of those resources, then that can be incredibly helpful to both us and to the folks we are supporting.
I remember the first time I presented on the word trauma sensitive, trauma informed, and people looked at me and said, I can't do that. I'm not a therapist. And I'm sitting there now. I don't teach. I do sometimes train and do courses with people who are at that level, but most of my training is with like normal people, like who are here, right? So I find that it's just as important to say what it isn't as to what it is, because we need to know that you do not need a PhD to be trauma informed. You don't need a PhD, a master's degree, a bachelor's degree, a community college diploma, advanced training, or a lot of training at all to be trauma sensitive. It's not a counseling technique. However, if you were one of my counseling students, I'd be telling you, you do a lot better if you follow this. Okay. Having said that, we interact and hold each other up in a way that doesn't require anyone to actually disclose that they've had a traumatic event. You don't need to know any of that. You do not need people to tell you. This is a way of being, an approach that actually very effective with everyone, because it's how we relate and how we create a relationship with other people, how we uplift each other, or as I think Julia said earlier, and I'm looking down, I want to quote Julia correctly here. Flourishing communities. That's what this is. All right. So we are in our relationship with others. It's not about counseling. It's not about self-disclosure. That instead, it's the way we do that communication, verbal and nonverbal, about creating safety and realizing that choice is in the hands of the person. You don't have to solve anything. Geez, maybe that might be the biggest learning here. We don't have to fix anything to have compassionate listening and be trauma sensitive. Instead, dare I say, and I suspect that most of us do this, we see the positive and the strengths in each other, and we maybe highlight that.
And while you'll hear us both using language that makes it sound as if we're saying, this is so easy. We can all do this. We all do this every day. It's not easy. We don't want to suggest that it's easy, because sitting with someone who is experiencing physical or emotional pain is not easy. But as Dale just said, once we realize we don't have to be there to fix it, holding space, being supportive in our words and our body language has an immense impact on the folks who choose to speak with us about their experiences. And the other thing I'd like to highlight a bit that Dale just said is this notion of we don't need to know everything that happened. We don't need to know any of the details. It doesn't matter. What matters is we're right here, right now, holding that space of compassion. And that does make a difference. So as you can read here, I don't need to read it to you, but compassionate listening, it's that personal practice. And it's something that, again, I believe because you're here right now listening to us in having this conversation, you're already doing this. Again, it's reflecting, it's cultivating it. Communication is the key. Remembering to listen, remembering we don't just listen with our ears, we listen with our bodies, with our minds. We reflect that in what we say and also in what we do. So there are situations where someone may choose to talk to us about a situation where a child or a vulnerable adult may be at risk. It is absolutely imperative that all of us understand what the rules are around those kinds of disclosures wherever we are living, because there is always a law that governs what is supposed to happen if someone who is not able to look after themselves, is not able to advocate for themselves, like a child, like a vulnerable adult. There are always laws and rules in place, and it's incredibly important that we all know what that looks like in our own area, because sometimes disclosures do involve situations that would require a referral to an agency. So again, if we were talking about this within our jurisdiction of Nova Scotia, we would be having a bit more conversation around where those lines get drawn. We've chosen not to spend time tonight doing that, but we do want you to understand that it's important that we all understand what the rules are in our area. Reflective listening is a technique that makes the other person feel understood and cared for. So when you say, I understand that you're hurting right now, or I hear that this is a difficult time for you, the person feels and understands that you truly care. And that can be transformative for that person. There's no need to make promises. And in fact, a very dear friend of mine said to me once, it's just as important for you to know what you can't do as it is to know what you can do. And that has a role in compassion, in compassionate listening and compassionate conversations. Remember, you don't have to fix the situation. It's also okay. And in fact, we encourage that you know where your boundaries lie. Because unless you are physically and emotionally safe, it's very difficult to be there for someone else.
How to respond. We need to give ourselves permission to know that we don't have to fix this. We don't have to call and report it anywhere unless there's certain addendums, which is not the majority of what any of us do. Uh, and that it's up to the person. And perhaps, even with this, when you're building safety and trustworthy choice and strength, if it's with our friends, the more we do this, the more likely they're going to really trust us. The more likely our communities will be trusting environments. So if someone wanted to take any other steps, they'd know who to come to because you're a trustworthy, honest person who's willing to listen.
Prioritize your own self care. If we think back to a time when we were able to fly, remember how flight attendants will say, if the oxygen mask comes down, put your own on first before you try to help someone else. That's what I think about when I think about supporting others. I need to be able to breathe before I can help someone else to be able to breathe. So that staying calm, the self-management, the more we practice that, the easier it becomes in that moment. And we'd encourage you to think about what kinds of support do you need for yourself? What
Yeah.
do you need in order to be there to support others? And this is once again where I do the little pitch for know the resources in your area. And don't just know them on the computer screen or from the pamphlet. If you'd like to know more about an organization that you've never needed to access, call them up,
Mhm.
have a conversation, learn the names of the folks who work there, who volunteer there, because
Mhm.
those connections will help to support you as you support others.
Mhm.
Again, I'll say, remember, this is not about being a professional. It's not about putting yourself at physical or emotional risk.
Mhm.
And the seed that we sow in every event that we facilitate is small actions matter. In fact, the small actions matter the most.
And just to reiterate what Rhonda's saying here is that nothing's small. When you are holding each other up, everything we do is important. It doesn't, it really is. I'm becoming speechless because I know it's so overwhelming for me to say this because we all seem to think, again, my years of teaching, it has to be this huge thing. No. And compassionate conversations start with being compassionate to ourselves. So when you want to be compassionate with others, you also have to be with yourself. Hence the reason why we're talking about self-care. All right. Again, our summary here. Remember, you don't have to ask any questions. You don't even need any disclosure. All right. You strengthen this compassionate connection by how we respond and by how we listen. And sometimes it's okay to tell someone, I really don't know what to say, but I'm sitting here with you. If you don't really know what to say, why not just tell the person, I'm not really sure, but I'm sitting with you and I'm listening. Okay. You're not required again to fix it. You validate the experiences, and here's some sentences that you can use. That must be difficult. Is there anything I can do to help you? I have some resources or numbers if you want them, or I can find them for you. I don't really know them right now, but I'm sure. Most of us have these things. Let me just Google and see what's around.
Also, encourage folks to maintain positive self care activities. And the best way to do that is by doing it ourselves. By modeling, we're helping to support. The last two bullets, the be aware of mandatory reporting in your area, being aware of your community resources. We've already talked a bit about that. And again, I will reiterate the importance of that for our own knowledge and in helping us to feel that we do have the resources behind us to have those compassionate conversations.